Everyone at St. Mary's Pediatric Oncology Ward remembered the chilly February morning when a quiet, frail boy named Eli was wheeled into room 207, his head tucked beneath an oversized navy blue knit hat and his small fingers gripping a worn-out toy firefighter like it was a lifeline. He didn't cry, didn't ask questions, just stared blankly at the fluorescent lights overhead. His mother Rachel walking beside him with red-rimmed eyes and a silence that spoke of too many sleepless nights and unanswered prayers, and while doctors and specialists shuffled in with clipboards and concerned faces, it was Nurse Abby, always the one with gentle hands and an open heart, who knelt down beside him, tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, and said, "Hey there, hero, I'm Abby, and I'm gonna be here with you every step of the way," not knowing then just how deeply those words would sink into that boy's soul. Abby had worked the ward for nearly 10 years, had seen children come and go. Some who walked out healed, and others who left behind teddy bears and broken parents, but something about Eli made her pause longer in his room, soften her voice a bit more, and sit in silence when there were no words left to say, maybe because of the way he clung to his hat as if it were armor, never once taking it off, not during vitals, not during chemo, not even when his scalp needed cleaning. And though the doctors chalked it up to embarrassment or fear of his hair falling out, Abby sensed something more hidden, more sacred, like the hat itself held a memory that he wasn't ready to release. Every day, Abby tried a little bit more, bringing coloring books, superhero stickers, silly knock-knock jokes that sometimes cracked a smile on his otherwise still face, and each time she asked, gently, "Can we take off your hat just for a second?" Eli would shake his head so hard it looked like his soul was saying no, and she'd back off, ruffle his blanket instead, and say, "That's okay, buddy, maybe tomorrow," because in room 207, patience was love and time was medicine. Days turned into weeks, and though his blood counts fluctuated and nausea came in waves, Eli never complained, never lashed out, he simply endured, like a quiet warrior, always watching, always clutching that same toy firefighter whose paint had chipped away from years of handling, and Rachel, his mother, always sat nearby with a paperback book she never read, her eyes constantly flicking up to make sure Eli was still breathing, still here, and when Abby asked once about the hat, Rachel hesitated, then whispered, "He hasn't taken it off since the fire," and her voice cracked like something sharp was caught in her throat, but she didn't elaborate, and Abby didn't press. Instead, she just stayed longer, sometimes sneaking in chocolate pudding or warming Eli's socks on cold mornings, learning his silent language, the way his shoulders tensed when he was scared, or how his lip quivered just before tears came, and little by little, he began to trust her, even if he still didn't speak much. Then, one afternoon, after 34 days of treatments and endless beeping machines, Abby walked into the room to find Eli drawing for the first time, a rough crayon sketch of a house. With black smoke rising from it, a tiny boy in the window, and a firefighter carrying him out under a sky of jagged red flames, and when she asked, softly, "Is that you?" he nodded once, and it hit her like a wave, that this boy had survived something far beyond illness, had walked through fire in more ways than one, and was still standing, still fighting, still holding on. And then came day 42, a Thursday, Abby's birthday, though she hadn't told anyone. And as she walked in with a balloon tied to her wrist, she saw Eli sitting upright, hat still on, but something in his eyes looked different, steadier, like he had made a decision he couldn't explain but felt in his bones, and after their usual hello, he reached for his crayons and drew another picture, this time of her, with her messy bun and nurse badge, holding hands with a small boy who wasn't wearing a hat, and at the bottom, in shaky letters, he had written, "Thank you for helping me feel safe," and Abby blinked back tears, not trusting her voice, and just sat beside him as the minutes passed like quiet miracles. Later that evening, when she came to check his Eli looked up at her and said, in the softest whisper, "You can take it off now," and Abby froze, the air suddenly too thick, the moment too sacred, and with trembling fingers, she reached for the edge of his hat and slowly lifted it, inch by inch, until it came free from his head. And then she gasped, her hand covering her mouth, because beneath that knit fabric wasn't just the baldness of chemo or the rawness of illness, but a web of silvery, jagged burned scars that crisscrossed his scalp like rivers of pain, and in the center of it all, etched crudely into the skin by trauma or tattoo, were the words, "Be brave like Daddy," and Abby's heart cracked open as the truth flooded her. Eli's father, a firefighter, had died rescuing his son from a burning home, and the boy had carried those scars, that message, and that loss under his hat every day, protecting it like a memory too precious for the world's eyes, and now, he had trusted her enough to share it. Tears slid down Abby's cheeks as she knelt beside him, pressing her forehead gently to his and whispering, "You are the bravest boy I've ever met," and Eli smiled. Not a half smile, not a scared smile, but a full, open, childlike smile that lit up the room like sunlight, and it was in that moment that Abby understood something she would carry forever, that healing doesn't always come from medicine, that sometimes it comes from being seen, from being loved through the pain, and that Eli, in his quiet strength, had taught her more about courage than any textbook or lecture ever could. From that day on, Eli wore his hat less and his smile more, becoming the unofficial big brother of the ward, helping younger kids through their fears, showing them his scars like a badge of honor, reminding them that broken things can still be beautiful. And when a local news station caught wind of his story and interviewed him in the playroom, he simply said, "My dad saved me, and now I just want to help save others," and there wasn't a dry eye in the hospital. Abby, watching from behind the camera crew, felt a pride so deep it left her breathless, and when Eli completed his treatment 6 months later and rang the golden remission bell in the lobby, the entire staff clapped and cheered, but it was Abby he ran to first, leaping into her arms, whispering, "Thank you for not giving up on me," and she held him tight, whispering back, "You saved me too, Eli." Years passed, and though life moved on, new patients, new battles, Abby never forgot that little boy. With the navy blue hat and firefighter toy, and every year on her birthday, without fail, a letter would arrive in her mailbox with a crayon drawing inside and a simple message, "Still being brave, still thinking of you," and one spring afternoon, now a teenager with tall shoulders and brighter eyes, Eli returned to St. Mary's carrying a box of hand-knit hats, each one blue, each one with "Be Brave" stitched into the front, and he handed them out to every child on the floor, saying, "When you're ready, you don't have to hide anymore." And when he hugged Abby goodbye, now with her first streaks of gray in her bun, he whispered, "You saw me when I couldn't see myself," and she whispered back, "And you taught me how to hope again." And as he walked down the hall, she watched him go with tears in her eyes and a heart full of something stronger than joy, something like grace, and in that moment, she realized the truth she'd always suspected, that the smallest gestures, a listening ear, a warm hand, a refusal to look away from pain, can lead to the biggest transformations, and that underneath every scar, behind every silence, there's a story waiting to be heard and a heart waiting to be healed, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do, is take off the hat.